In this video, taken by a bystander, we see an officer and a horse lying in the middle of the street, narrating a profoundly tragic story. Harrigan and his partner, Ronald Curry, had been working together on the same route in Houston, Texas for more than a year. They liked their job, which took them around the city. They got along well, and they had strong bonds with their horses. They had been working together since their first day as police officers. Riding horses made it easier for them to be flexible and quick in their police work. They could catch thieves or get to hard-to-reach places quickly to help people. The pair was well known along their route and were often treated by the vendors on the road. They would spoil the horses, especially Charlotte, a 6-year-old horse that Harrigan had been riding for the last 3 years. They were closer than close. In some ways, Harrigan simply saw Charlotte as an extension of his own body. The beautiful horse was also quite perceptive of everything around her, which often helped in emergencies. Harrigan's partner, Curry, would often joke that she was like a bloodhound in the way. She worked always seeming to sense trouble before they did. The partners put quite a bit of faith in her. Some days were more challenging than others, especially when their shift fell during peak hour traffic. Have you ever noticed how spooked some animals get around cars? Well, Charlotte and her rider were quite used to heavy traffic, but animals are never quite as predictable as we would like them to be. Unfortunately that day, Charlotte did something unpredictable that cost her life. The day started off as normal as ever. Harrigan arrived at the precinct early and waited for Curry to start their shift. It was customary that they had coffee with one another before their day began. This way, they could ease into their shift. The morning shift was the one they both detested the most, because they would be patrolling around lunchtime, which meant heavy traffic. The weather was also oppressively warm, so it's safe to say they weren't looking forward to it. The only nice thing about having a shift during lunch break was the kindergartners who finished their school day. Those children were Charlotte's favorites. Harrigan and Curry knew how much joy the horse's presence brought to the little kids. So whenever they worked the lunchtime shift, they would make sure to hang around the kindergarten so that the children could say hi to the horses. On this day, though, something seemed to be off with Charlotte. She appeared quite on edge. When the kids came out from school, they all ran up to her to stroke her and nuzzle her, but she didn't respond as she usually did. There was very little affection coming from her, and she seemed to be in quite a daze. Harrigan started to become quite concerned about her behavior. He had never known her to act in this way. However, they had never had a day quite as hot as the one they were currently experiencing. So eventually, he put it down to the heat. He knew he was feeling quite grumpy and had brain fog, so he could only imagine how Charlotte must have been feeling. After their stop with the kids, the officers would then venture off into the park to patrol. This was always a peaceful part of the shift, but that depended on what the officers came across. Sometimes if there were any criminals around, it could lead to a high-speed chase of a pickpocket or shoplifter. The ample space allowed for it, and the horses quite enjoyed letting off some steam. However, on this particular day, the most exciting thing they came across was a squirrel carrying too many nuts. The scene was quite hilarious to look at. Harrigan and Curry took a break to have a good laugh and stretch their legs. The horses seemed to enjoy the relief from their backs. It wasn't long, though, before they needed to get back on the road. They had a call from someone within City Central who cautioned that there may be some issues outside the store, something along the lines of a domestic dispute. This was not unusual for this time of the month. It was the end of the month, and right before people got paid, tensions would always get high. The pair briskly made their way to their destination, knowing that time was of the essence in these cases. This is where being on a horse really had its benefits. The flexibility of being able to weave through traffic and go onto the sidewalks if needed helped make the officers super efficient. However, on this particular day, it proved to be rather detrimental. They were about a 10-minute ride away from where they needed to be and could do it easily enough. But Charlotte was just not herself that day. When they tried to take off with some speed, she simply refused to go any faster. It was like she was hesitant about something that lay before them, but Harrigan just couldn't possibly see what that might be. Eventually, they managed an adequate pace to get to where they needed to be. They were just around the corner when something truly tragic happened. Harrigan had relaxed into a comfortable stride with Curry beside him. Up until now, they had been cutting through the traffic as best they could, but the roads were just growing too busy, so they changed to the sidewalk. But as they did this, a loud shrieking sound came echoing towards them. The alarm from a shop on the side of the road went off unexpectedly. Under normal circumstances, this shouldn't have changed anything, but that day, the sound was triggering for Charlotte. Before Harrigan could even react, Charlotte had spooked completely. She threw her front legs up into the air and jumped into the traffic. As she did that, she came face to face with a speeding cement truck that was passing by. The impact was so severe that the pair was knocked quite a distance from where they had initially been. Harrigan was thrown even further away than his horse. Luckily, his feet had come out of the stirrups, but the impact of being thrown still knocked him out completely. Curry was beside himself. The tragedy had occurred right before his eyes in less than a few seconds. How could it have happened? Without thinking, he dismounted his horse and ran directly into traffic. He knew that he needed to shield Charlotte from any drivers that might be unaware of them. While he did this, he radioed for urgent help. He needed an ambulance and a vet, and fast. By the time the medics arrived, Curry knew that there was something terribly wrong with Charlotte. She had failed to get up multiple times and seemed to be in severe pain. The medics weren't too concerned about Harrigan since apparently he would be okay. He still needed to go to the hospital for a thorough checkup, but the paramedics weren't worried about his health. The vet, however, was not so optimistic. Curry could see straight away from her face that it wasn't going to be good news. It turned out that the impact from the truck had completely shattered Charlotte's back legs. The vet said the best way to care for her now would be to put her down. Curry didn't know what to do. He was beside himself. He knew how Harrigan felt about Charlotte, but there was simply nothing he could do to help his best friend. Harrigan had already left for the hospital, and Curry was now all alone with the horse and the vet, so he did the only thing he thought he could. Officer Curry knelt down and lay beside Charlotte as the vet administered euthanasia. He whispered soothing words to comfort her and let her know that everything would be all right. He believed that if he could be there for her in her last moments, he could tell Harrigan that he had done his best. Unbeknownst to Curry, there were onlookers with teary eyes witnessing the scene. One of them managed to capture a photo that later went viral. This photo encapsulates the heartbreaking tale of a dedicated officer who tragically lost his life in the line of duty after a lifetime of service. This is a very sad story. Can you imagine seeing this in person? What would you do in that situation? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. We appreciate your input. Thank you.